Elementary by Schmem14. Summary. Who knew finding a new flatmate could be so difficult? Harry slashed what had to be his 53rd X in the Daily Prophet classifieds before tossing the whole thing in the bin and giving it up as a bad job. 53 ads in the last 2 weeks, and no closer to solving his problem.
"Why not go and living at Grimmauld Place?"
Ron asked when Harry joined him for lunch inside the ministry cantina, where he still worked and Harry no longer did.
"I'm sure you could find an elf who's looking for work now that's creatures."
He bit the words off at the look on Harry's face. The place was so infested with doxies and other unspeakable horrors in the years Harry had been abroad that it would have to be completely gutted to be habitable. Without creature, it felt wrong to try. Harry sipped his coffee and glanced around the room. People everywhere peeked above their papers, muttering to each other and pointing at him when they thought he wasn't looking. He'd experienced the same problem while searching for new lodgings. Every simpering, oogling, pitying prospective flatmate became another red X shortly thereafter. Harry endured the fame of being the boy who lived for far too long and was now exhausted by the infamy of his failures as an aura. Harry's fist tightened around his cane until the faded scars on his hand glowed white.
"It's impossible to find someone in this town to flat share with, and real estate is bloody expensive. Maybe I should give up on London." "You could stay with Hermione and I,"
Ron offered, but Harry shook his head. Hermione was expecting, and they would need their spare room for a nursery in just a few months.
"Nah, it's all right. I'm impossible, I suppose. Can't seem to find a flatmate who'll be able to handle all of my—"
Harry gestured to himself.
"Baggage." "You know what? I think I know who you could ask." "Really?" "Yeah, I know this bloke who works in the building is looking for someone. You might hit it off."
Ron took his and Harry's empty cups, dumping them in the bin as Harry hobbled after him. Instead of going up to the second floor where the aura offices were, Ron pressed the golden number 9. The gold cage box juddered to life and swooped downward. Harry hadn't been to the Department of Mysteries in years, but the prospect of going back down there made his skin crawl. If Ron had mentioned this mysterious colleague was an unspeakable, maybe he wouldn't have accepted. They were ushered through the circular antechamber by a bland-faced unspeakable, waiting until the blur of doors slowed like the ticking of a wheel of fortune. The door before them swung open to reveal a room that reminded Harry of a Muggle laboratory, with its bright cold light and sterile slab tables. The man inside had his back to Harry and Ron, but Harry could see the curl of his dark hair peeking out over an upturned coat collar, back straight, tall, slim as a sapling, as he—
Is that what I think it is?"
Harry asked, trying to restrain his shock as he stared in horror at the scene. The man wielded his wand like a lasso, a glowing cord of magic kinching tied around the neck of what appeared to be a corpse. Ron sighed, scratched his head in a bemused manner, and shrugged.
"Could have told me it was a psychopath,"
Harry muttered out of the corner of his mouth.
"He could do worse. He's an independent investigator. We walk with him sometimes up at the DMLE. Bloody genius he is, and he's helped us out of a bind or two."
The man started to speak in a low murmur to an unspeakable that shifted into view, clipboard poised for note-taking. Harry could just make out murmured observations about bruising patches and 5-minute intervals. Harry shuffled his feet, the click of his cane unexpectedly loud in the muted silence. The man stiffened, pocketed his wand, and turned around. His inky blue eyes caught on Harry's for barely longer than a nanosecond, but aeons of time passed in the interim. Harry felt everything from dread, shame, awe, and staggering panic to annoyance with an aftertaste of familiarity.
He knew that face.
But from where? Harry opened his mouth to ask, but before he could form the words, the man swept past him in a whoosh of heady cedarwood cologne tinged with tobacco.
Weasley?
He nodded to Ron, his voice an octave lower than Harry expected. He slipped a pair of leather gloves from his pocket, sliding them onto his long fingers as he wheeled around to regard Harry with that cold, dispassionate gaze.
"I suppose you'll do, Potter," he said. "Are you coming?"
It didn't occur to Harry to argue. He looked back at Ron for reassurance, but his useless friend shrugged and made a "well, get on with it then" gesture. And then Harry was on his way, struggling to keep up with the graceful gait of the man leading him on. It wasn't until the atrium that his brain caught up with his mouth and he asked,
"I'm sorry, I don't even know you. Where is it we're meant to be going?"
The man didn't spare him a glance, but Harry thought he saw the corner of his mouth twitch upwards as he continued at the same brisk pace towards the outgoing fireplaces.
"To my flat, of course. I would have thought that was obvious." Right,"
Harry equivocated. He stopped walking, his heart thumping with the exertion of their speed walk as the men turned to face him again.
"You're looking for a flatmate, are you not?" "How did you know? Did Ron tell ye?"
The man rolled his eyes.
"It's not that hard to tell, really."
Harry shifted his weight to his good leg and leaned into his cane.
"Oh, enlighten me."
The man's gaze sharpened back to that intense scrutiny from before as he roved over every detail of Harry's person. The well-worn shoulder bag Harry had taken on his travels, the scuff patterns on his shoes, the way he wore his hair short, nearly bust to the skull, the red ink stain on his thumb. Harry straightened, striving to stand proud as he'd done before the accident. "You're back in town after spending the last 3 years on the lam, and thought the papers say you're away for your health. The healers pronounce you cured not long after the bomb blew your thigh apart, but you still have a lingering psychosomatic twinge that you have nursed into a disability, or crutch, as it were. You don't feel like London is home anymore, but you can't bear the thought of living anywhere else. You've alienated all your friends from before, and you detest the idea of imposing on their kindness out of sheer pride. You don't like people or predictable routines, and above all, can't abide the grueling necessity of small talk. I'd say that's rather a lot to be getting on with." The man turned on his heel and kept walking, leaving Harry to follow indignantly in his wake.
"Wait, you could tell all that by just looking at me."
"Of course," he answered with an air of incredulity. "Can't everyone?"
"Well, like that," Harry thought. "Do I know you from somewhere?"
he blurted. The man smirked.
"Yes, from school." "Ravenclaw?"
"Slytherin.
Though that was a technicality, of course. Familial expectations and all that.
Ah, here we are." The man reached a hand into the gilded flower pot affixed to the fireplace wall for a fistful of green ash. 221B, Baker Street, the man called into the flames. He turned and gave Harry one last nod.
"And the name is Theo Nott,"
he said before spinning out of existence. Theo Nott. He was that weedy-looking boy who sometimes hung around Malfoy and his gang, Harry remembered. He gritted his teeth against a disorienting whirl of movement before stumbling out at the other end. He was standing in a sitting room that could be described as cozy by some, but maximalist by most. A pair of mismatched leather chairs were arranged on a threadbare Persian rug. Books, papers, and teacups littered the floors and tables. In the corner, Harry saw a duster levitating atop an antique clock, clouds of dust blooming above it as it swept up cobwebs. Distantly, he registered that Theodore was talking to him while shifting aside piles of books, slugging his way to a handsome wood desk where more of the same clutter resided.
Hope you don't mind a bit of violin playing. Helps me think. The bedroom's through there. The landlady reminded me that there's a spare bed in the attic, but she's thoroughly convinced that I'm inviting a boyfriend to live with me, so she insists just one will be enough. Do you have a boyfriend?
Harry couldn't help but ask.
Theodore smiled as if some private joke. No, eternal bachelor type, I'm afraid.
Harry felt exactly the same way about himself.
Just like you, am I right?
Harry wasn't sure he would ever get used to Theodore's forthrightness, which was when Harry realized he'd already begun to envision a future where they would get used to each other. Theodore tossed his black coat to a leaden coat to stand in the corner, which bent nearly double to catch it, a deerstalker cap on top tottering as it righted itself. He propped himself against the edge of the desk to survey Harry while he fiddled with something between his fingers. A tape measure, Harry realized one split second before Theodore flung it at him. Harry dropped his cane to catch it, but it was too late. The thing whipped around his body, his neck, and suddenly Harry was fighting for his life, grappling, gripping, struggling in vain.
Finita,
Theodore murmured when Harry was on the verge of collapsing from loss of air.
What the fuck was that for?
Harry shouted, ambling over to Theodore, gripping his lapels and slamming him into the edge of the desktop.
You could have killed me. I'm not a body in the morgue that you can fuck with.
Hot air huffed over Harry's face. Theodore was laughing at him. His shoulders were shaking, his body jostling against Harry's. He didn't pull away or seem bothered by the invasion of personal space at all. Theodore's bottomless blue eyes crinkled at the corners in his mouth.
Stunning, Harry thought wistfully. I never intended to kill you. I was testing a theory. And what theory is that? Harry asked, leaning closer in spite of himself, hanging on every word before Theodore could even tell him.
A feathery thump on the glass window broke the spell. Theodore slid out of Harry's grasp to admit a handsome tawny owl into the room. Theodore scanned the scrap of post, the ice in his eyes thawing until they were glowing with promise of good news. A crack in his case? A letter from a loved one? Another interested tenant, perhaps? Harry couldn't bear that last thought.
4th strangulation case in 2 weeks. Another cursed tape measure, this time a tailor from Twilfit and Tettings.
Theodore summoned his coat with a snap of his fingers, grinning like it was a Christmas morning.
Come along, Potter. The game is on.
Harry was about to protest about his leg, but noted with surprise that it felt perfectly fine. His cane still lay on the other side of the room.
See, I was right about that as well,
Theodore explained, noticing Harry's look of wonder at the revelation.
You crave danger and death in a way that supersedes any mental cages.
Harry could only nod. It made sense. Best of all, it felt right. It was the easiest thing in the world to follow Theodore as he absconded from the room in his enthusiastic fervour, the purpose filling Harry with new life like nothing had in years.